Hello, Dr. Chung. Thank you so much for joining the Cri du Chat Research Foundation today. Could you start, please, by introducing yourself to the fellow 5P minus families and supporting community listening?
Sure. I'm Wendy Chung. I'm a medical geneticist, physician scientist, and do what I can to support the rare disease community, including the Cri du Chat or the 5P minus community.
Well, thank you. You certainly are an expert in genetic neurodevelopmental disorders as well as rare disease research. So we are incredibly honored to have you as part of a member of our scientific board, as well as addressing our greater community today. Could
Yes.
you tell, thank you. Could you tell us about the progress science has made over the last, say, decade in terms of treatment development for genetic diseases?
Sure. So there's been an enormous amount of progress made in the last 10 years, and I expect things will accelerate even more over the next 10 years. Um, for 5P minus, I know people probably feel like it's complicated, and it is. For some of the advances that have been made, and you may have heard about some opportunities for gene therapy that have been realized. So far, those have been for single gene conditions. So in other words, there's been one particular gene and people have been able to either add back or to be able to somehow manipulate the expression or the manifestations of one gene so far. And I know some people, some families out there probably feel like, well, the problem with 5P minus, or a challenge, I should say, with 5P minus is it's not just one gene. And so when I break it down and think about it, one of the things that has been done in the community is to think about what are the critical genes within the region of 5P. And so maybe you don't have to get everything. Maybe there are opportunities to target the genes that are most relevant and most important. So that's the first thing that's been done. The other thing that is just starting to be realized, and I don't want to say that it's been solved because people are still working hard at it, but there are methods in addition to trying to either replace or alter single genes to be able to think about entire chunks of DNA. And this is really relevant to the 5P minus. And it seemed, I have to admit, even 2 years ago, sort of pie in the sky for me to think about. But there are emerging technologies to be able to replace or to be able to fix large chunks of DNA or large, even segmental chromosomes. We're not there yet. It's going to take multiple steps to be able to realize that and to make sure that that can be done both safely and effectively. But there is a technology, or even more than one technology in place to be able to do that. And that wasn't something I could have said even just a couple of years ago. So I think that's incredibly hopeful in terms of thinking about the future for our community in particular. So there are also advances that are being made, in particular for many of the families out there. You realize that the day-to-day in terms of what can often be most impactful is what I say is above the shoulder. So in other words, what's going on with the brain and development and the way the brain affects functioning. Everything from communication skills to daily living skills to behaviors and being able to adapt. All of those are really in the brain. And again, this is not something that's been solved yet, but I am optimistic in terms of delivery methods to be able to get genetic therapies to the brain. Again, it's not trivial. The brain is a very complicated organ. There are multiple cells that need to be treated. We need to make sure that we're treating, if not all the cells, as many of the cells as possible. Then there are very specific ways that our body protects the brain with something called a blood-brain barrier. So ways of being able to protect this very precious organ. So there are multiple things that we have to do to be able to get to the brain, get to all the cells in the brain, get whatever the treatment is to stay in there and to be able to penetrate the cells in terms of all the brain cells. But there are incredible advances that are being made in terms of either what we call viral vectors to be able to deliver genes to the brain, or even things that don't include any sort of virus particles at all. Ways of being able to, people may have gotten the Moderna vaccine for COVID, and that uses some of the technology in terms of lipids that can encapsulate and be able to deliver either in the case of the virus and mRNA or other things to be able to get to cells and get to brain cells. So I am optimistic that that same technology that's not specific to Cri du Chat, but it's being used for many different brain conditions, because there's so many of them, a lot of people are motivated to get that technology to work, and there are advances being made literally almost every day in terms of that. So multiple pieces of the puzzle, but whether we end up with one single gene that we're trying to deliver for 5p minus, whether it's a whole suite of genes, and how to get in there safely and to make sure it lasts, I think all of those fronts are moving forward, and that's cause for excitement.
Absolutely. It sounds all very compelling. And I could imagine that along with our family, the rest of the 5P minus families will be very excited to hear about this progress. So, what can the 5P minus families and supporting community do in partnership with CDCRF to really help accelerate this research forward to find a treatment for 5P minus syndrome?
So there's a lot that you can do. And I'll say that every single day, today already included, I spend time talking to people who are thinking about trying to develop treatment for rare genetic conditions. And they're motivated by wanting to have an impact. And I'll just be very pragmatic. They want to have impact on as many people as possible. And they go around literally thinking about where could I be able to have an impact? And we need to, as a community, be organized to be able to demonstrate that, show our numbers, be able to be stand up and be counted. Because they literally will look and survey in terms of saying there are many different rare genetic conditions, 7,000 and counting. And among 7,000, if there's some subset, say 1,000, that could be treated with their technology, how do they decide amongst those 7,000 which ones to prioritize and how to be able to have their impact? And so one of the metrics they look at is they literally look at numbers. And I know some people may say, well, we're not mighty in numbers, but you are actually. So one of the things about Cri du Chat or 5p minus is it's been known for a long time. And so in terms of having a genetic diagnosis, many people in the community, not just our young people, like our little bitty ones, our babies and toddlers and preschool people, but throughout the life spectrum, throughout the entire age spectrum, we have people who've been diagnosed because we've had the technology to do that for decades. And so that's different than many other communities. So we have our numbers on our side across the age spectrum, and that's important. But we do need to stand up and be counted and have ourselves organized so that companies know or researchers know where are people, exactly what stage in life are they in, do we have even minimal information about them, and what's important to you as families? What would make a meaningful difference in terms of your day-to-day lives that would be something that if we were to design a treatment for would be a goal for us to try and achieve? This is what would have a meaningful difference. And I think some people may dismiss something like Cri du Chat and say, well, we're not going to be able to make people, spot on 100% quote unquote normal with our treatment. So, some people might say, well, let's not even worry about that. Let's try and think about something else. But I would argue that there are things that would make really big impacts on your day-to-day lives for your loved one, for you as a family member, and that's not inconsequential. And the FDA or the regulatory agencies in Europe, the EMA, when they think about this, they do consider that. It doesn't have to be quote unquote a cure in terms of making someone 100% normal in terms of this, but it's something that would be considered a significant improvement. And only you all can tell people like me, researchers and scientists and doctors, what that meaningful difference is to you. And then to be able to show us data in terms of how your person is doing with that particular metric. So whether it's communication, whether it's issues that might be gastrointestinal issues, whether it's seizures, whatever it might be, we need data to understand where are we now and where do we want to be. And companies, researchers, as they think about where to target their energy, they look at how engaged a community is. So how not only do we know how many they are and where they are in the world, but how much do they seem to be engaged in trying to come up with a solution? And the more engaged that patient community is, the more likely they are to know that they've got a good partner moving forward. And it's all about partnerships. No one can do this alone. Families can't do it alone. Doctors can't do it alone. Scientists can't do it alone. We've all got to be working together for this.
Okay. Absolutely. So it sounds like now more than ever is the time for our community to really pull together in partnership with CDCRF and to drive our mission forward. So I know from an organization standpoint, we are really encouraging our 5P minus families and supporting communities to become a rare disease advocate for their child and loved one. So if that means through data collection or blood sample submission or raising funds, we need to do this around the world to further create this movement. Families can participate in a Make Your Own Pride campaign, which is a fun way for families to make a fundraiser personalized and dedicate those funds directly to our organization and be featured on our social media and websites and tag the next family to get involved. They can seek funding through philanthropy gifts and go to our website, www.criduchatresearch.org, to make a direct donation there. And I want to remind the community that we are an official nonprofit 501c3. So 100% of our contributions go directly to research and driving this mission forward. On behalf of the Cri du Chat Research Foundation, Dr. Chung, we really want to thank you very much for your time and insight today, and we look forward to further collaboration and hearing from you.
Thank you for having me, Megan. It's great to have you as a leader for the community as well.
Thank you so much.